Today, we're really thinking about resident engagement and, thinking about some of those key lessons learned around the challenge, the risks, the conflicts that might arise. Always a popular topic to talk about on our masterclasses, which is why we have so many of these sessions. So this session today, we're going to be looking at some of those key themes, really around those lessons learned, those key challenges, and then some things for going forward. So future funding in whatever realm that looks like. So if we have a look at the guidance that came out as a part of Wave 2.2, so the last pot that was available, in this, there was some clear guidance around it. So the Wave 2.2 competition really focusing on people. So comfort, health, and well-being really highlighted here for those tenants in social housing. Thinking about it in the context of warmer and more energy efficient homes, but absolutely around when we are applying for that grant, really demonstrating how the tenant needs will be considered and addressed as part of this. Thinking how that tenant engagement piece is absolutely essential to securing the success of your project. So again, with any future funding that comes out, what we want to be looking for is what is the guidance saying, and putting people at the heart of it is really that golden thread that is coming through. So for most of us, we will fully understand why resident engagement is so important. Absolutely, it is about the benefits of that wider project. So enhancing properties, including the residents as part of that. If you've attended any of my sessions before, I quite often talk about some tower block projects that I've worked on in the past, where tenants had a palette of colours to pick from, and they were able to select from that palette which colour they had. And that really gave such a buy-in to the project. It overcame a lot of the challenges because the residents were incorporated into that project. I still to this day pass by that tower block and I see it in its terracotta colour and know that the residents picked that colour. In the future, I'm sure we might see it in a different colour, but right now it always is something that's really important and has always stuck with me when we talk about resident engagement. Residents absolutely want to be part of this. They want to be heard, that voice, that understanding about what matters to them. So giving that opportunity, really, really important. Understanding, being able to ask questions. Having that project be something that doesn't just happen to them, but they are part of, is really, really important. And when we come into that, it's thinking about the benefits that they might see. And for some, it will be about controlling the heating within their home, for example, being able to have that control of when the heating goes on. Historically, there might have been some issues around controlling that. For some, it will be just about having that warm space. It will be about improving it. It will be thinking, okay, energy efficiency. I've got some fabric features as well as maybe a replacement system. So bringing all of those ideas into about the tenant, the resident, the person who is going to be enjoying that home, thinking about how they're going to be there. Making sure that engagement piece, so any of the past 2035 projects, how is that engagement piece going to pan out? How does it look like to a resident, that what they will be involved with? Where are the opportunities for discussion? And really think about that guidance, that understanding, that knowledge, utilising fabulous tenants champions, for example. There might be a really fantastic tenant liaison officer or tenancy manager that already exists within your organisation that is the kind of key in terms of putting that forward. And absolutely really thinking about how any retrofit programme absolutely is going to have people at the core of it. Unfortunately, things happen. We don't have a perfect situation. There are always going to be things that change, and sometimes it does absolutely go wrong. But understanding that and really thinking, okay, well, why has this happened is really important. So, resident engagement is really a key factor in any stage of the retrofit program that you might have planned out. It is essential that it is in all parts of that program, and making sure that it is available to people, that it is recognised, and that when things haven't worked, that we are really recognising that actually that poor engagement has massively impacted the uptake by residents for a particular project, that it has led to delays, that it has led to challenge. And in the worst case, it has led to, when there have been significant refusals, that grant funding has had to be handed back. And none of us want that. We want that grant funding to be enabled to be utilised by organisations to improve the homes. That inability for that grant funding to be spent is a massive negative on any project. Ultimately, it can lead to that retrofit project not going ahead, or not as many numbers being able to be completed. And again, nobody wants that to happen, because we want to see this improvement of the homes that we see within England. So understanding those key challenges, really important. What we've tried to do here is kind of break it down into different sections, because I think each organisation will have different challenges. You'll have a different size. So some of you might have 100 properties. Some of you might have 38,000 properties. Some of you will be very refined and kind of designated in a particular geographical setting. Others, it will be spread across. It might be spread across the whole of England. It might be spread across various counties, council areas. So again, we know that there are challenges, and we know that there are absolute risks in this. What we need to really understand is those low access or those refusal rates. It's really understanding how this has a massive impact. And of course, we do not want to be forcing projects to happen to people and to properties. So understanding that and really looking at that root cause of things. It might be that there has been a particular issue with accepting contractors into properties. This might be a historical thing that has happened years ago. And as a result, that tenant doesn't feel happy in accepting contractors into the home. So it's understanding how that might be part of the big picture for this particular project, and understanding about how we can address that in changing that. So it might be things like shift patterns. So it might be that actually works can't take place at a particular time because actually that resident worked nights, for example, and therefore doesn't want someone coming into their home and disturbing that sleep, because enabling them to get to their work that following evening. So really understanding tenants, really understanding the residents, who they are, and what their patterns are, can be one of the ways to really unpack that particular issue. There might be resistance in terms of gender, for example. It might be in terms of cultural differences around having certain people in the home. It might be a mental health issue. Many people have that concern about going outside. So having someone from outside come in can be a real challenge to people. So understanding it, getting those tenant teams in, you might have community teams, you might have mental health first aiders, practitioners who can also help in this process. So again, in some of the other strategy essentials modules we've talked about that unpacking of the silos to really pull together a project team that means we can address a whole range of different things. You might have maintenance and asset teams that have worked on kitchen renewals. They might have some really great pieces of information about particular residents that there is a challenge into addressing in terms of those. So that lack of understanding about what retrofit means. I've seen some examples where we haven't used the word retrofit, where we've used refurbishment or home improvement to get that different terminology, like you would with, say, a kitchen improvement. So again, understanding where that can be, thinking about how tenants might not be confident in what the language is in terms of what is being set out. Can we unpack that somehow and think about, if they don't have it done, what might that resident be missing out on? Reputationally, can be a real challenge. Understanding how actually if something doesn't get delivered, how that can have an impact on they never do anything, they never manage to complete anything. So again, really understanding how we can process things, that it means that we have a really positive project at the end of it, and we see those improvements in the performance of properties. The no access one is a real challenge, particularly with post-COVID. Still going through that process of people being able to have a sense of people being around or in their homes. Understanding that certain works will need to take place. For example, if we are installing an electrical based heating system, for example, the consumer units will need to be accessed. Now, understanding where those are and how much disruption that might be can be an opportunity to say, well, actually, this is all where we need to go. We don't need to go into your lounge or your bathroom or your bedroom. We just need to go to this space. We don't need to go anywhere else. Explaining that, having that understanding can be the potential that means that access will be then granted. The retrofit assessments, are a massive opportunity to really understand that property. I know that there are tenants that you might have who have been in those properties for potentially 30 plus years. And it might be that actually they haven't had kitchen improvements or bathroom improvements. It might always be a struggle to get in to do the fire risk assessments. So understanding that person and finding that trusted person to be able to talk to them to enable the retrofit assessment to go ahead in the first place can be one of those really big challenges. This could be a neighbour. It could be a third party charity, for example. It might be that it is a challenge because of that person's personal circumstance. They might have a disability. They might be recently bereaved. There are multiple things that might impact that lack of access to even get that assessment done. And so understanding that tenant, that resident, really vital in this. That no access, that no retrofit assessment being undertaken can ultimately mean that actually that property is not going to be included within the programme. That can then multiply itself forward if multiple people are saying no to a particular programme. So understanding how we can push that forward and understand the measures and how best to communicate that, engage the community in terms of what is going to happen, how it's going to take place, and really move it forwards. We, of course, don't want this to also lead to delays. So absolutely, delays can happen. We know that with switching from gas boilers to, say, a heat pump can be a challenge resulting from third parties. That can absolutely be a massive challenge, and delays are and can be really stressful to our residents and our tenants, because if they had planned something in to either be away or to make sure that they're in with their job so that something can be kind of configured, and then that is changing, that can be quite a stressful process to that. So understanding how that can impact a particular resident, a group of residents, or even a whole estate, it can be it can be a real challenge. It's also linking into other agencies. So thinking about when there are potential delays due to, I don't know, highways works going on as well, it's understanding how that might then have an impact as well as the retrofit project. So that inconvenience to multiple people can result in delays. We've seen it with procurement of materials, that can be a real challenge in terms of getting materials, getting them to site, hyperinflation in terms of procurement of materials as well. So really having that challenge around that. Thinking about contractors and residents as well, we can see that sometimes delays happen. Contractors going into administration, so we might have procured someone, the organisation massively unfortunately goes into administration. There will undoubtedly be a delay in replacing that particular contractor. That can then add to the disruption, the concern, site cabins taking up car parking, massive point of stress for multiple people. So again, really understanding how we can kind of look at that. Additional costs as well if we have delays. Sometimes it's the weather. If it is particularly cold, when we have storms, having storm damage to scaffold, having that rechecked, maybe reinstalled, can be a real challenge. We also have things like if a property is going through right to buy or right to acquire, that can also be a trigger point for a delay, because if that then doesn't go through, that property can potentially then have the assessment undertaken. So lots of challenges, very much moving, but delays can be a real challenge area. We also find that absolutely there are points of conflict. There will be people in terms of having a resistance to change, not wanting things to be done in a different way. But it's about being those kind of being as open and as honest, and recognizing that those conflicts can take on more than necessarily anticipated. So again, thinking about increased traffic, parking in particular. If they are a member of the considerate contractors scheme, there are points that they can get for being much more considerate in terms of having designated areas where that parking should be, in terms of those professionals coming into the area to deliver that. I mentioned before weather. We can't necessarily fully predict the extent of how weather might have an impact on us. That's not just necessarily in winter, so cold, snow, precipitation, but also in the summer when we have those particular moments of overheating and the result of climate change, more likely to see those issues. And also that challenge of how people are spoken to. People are absolutely at the heart of it. So understanding what is going to be important to those tenants, those residents, really important in smoothing out those potential conflicts. If we've had other projects, and that doesn't have to be retrofit, it could be grounds landscaping, it could be car park lighting. What are the lessons learned there that we've had? What were the key things that we learned about that? Is it that there is a resident committee, on a large estate? So how can we kind of get involved in that organisation, that committee, to understand what is going to be the key conflicts that might exist? So I would put money on parking being definitely one of them, but also it might pull out things about language. It might pull out things about the technology, the knowledge, prior experience, all of these things, pulling it together. So making sure that if there are delays, that those are really communicated well, that we have that transparency and that clear process of thought. So when we're thinking about it, we go back to this slide that hopefully some of you will have already seen from previous modules that you might have attended and previous masterclasses. So we have this customer journey. What I would always say is that for your particular retrofit project, what you might want to consider is that continuous loop. So bringing it right back down to the beginning in terms of that planning. So we have these 7 steps in terms of the retrofit customer journey. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end, the duration of which will be unique and bespoke to your organisation. But having that transparency and that clear communication to your residents can be really important in this, in terms of understanding it. Fully appreciate that sometimes the scale and speed that things get mobilized can mean that these get kind of squidged together. But again, it's making sure that that is communicated, that if things are brought forward, that the tenants are at the heart of that and understand that timescales can change. This might be a massive benefit. It might be that scaffolds gets it on site reduced by 2 weeks. But it's understanding that actually we have to have this process. We've got to consider that beginning bit, our plan, what we're going to do, how we hand over things, so where people can find information, particularly pertinent if we are having change of tenancies. So you might have a retrofit project, the house has had the full whole house retrofit project worked out. The tenant and the resident has had the training, has got a manual, might have a QR code to scan if that gets wet or whatever it might be. There might be a tenant champion as well. If that tenant and resident moves out, so they move to a different area, for example, that person coming in is going to need that knowledge, that understanding, the access, and understanding how that can also be a challenge is really important. So that handover and post works is really an essential piece that should always feed then back into those wider organisational strategies around tenant communication, around liaison, around how we communicate with everyone. So this is a really nice way of looking at it. The plan for engaging with residents should be something that is developing, that changes, that has adaptation into it. It might be that there is extra funding that is enabled and therefore some more projects can be pulled through. Whatever it might be, it is a open, it is something that is live and should of course update if there are any particular concerns. With lots of these masterclasses, what we like to do is have a look at what some organisations are doing. So this is just one example. There are multiple great examples out there that we can have a look at. And so this is just one example that we have pulled up. So this is from the home group. We will share the link with you so that you've got that. And what the focus of this was really trying to, and in their own words, onboard tenants and residents and customers as part of this. So for these properties, they're based in rural Cumbria. So again, can be a massive challenge due to the geographical setting. Thinking about a project of about 90 properties, so relatively large scale for this area. And this was a whole house retrofit project with fabric first and then a low carbon technology installed. And what Home Group did was really think about how can we address these issues? How can we communicate with our people? And they developed an in-depth communication for the community and engagement strategy for this project. So there were traditional letters. So again, understanding what has worked well in the past. That method of communication has worked well in the past. So letters have been used here as well. Also thinking about those one-to-one sessions. So again, having someone from home and the contractor having that discussion with the residents, so plural, and tenants to really talk through what is being planned, how it will look like, what it will kind of result in, so the benefits to them. Also having wider, more engagement days, so upscaling and upskilling more people in terms of that knowledge and understanding, and also the engagement with the appointed contractor. So again, having a face to the name, that again, it's people at the heart of it. It's these are going to be your contractors. These are going to be the people that will be working in your area. And again, really working on all of these four elements to bring forward that retrofit project to aim to have a positive outcome. And so what we see in terms of some of the details is that understanding the residents, understanding the tenants was really important as part of this. So they found of the 90 people that of the 90 homes, 80% felt that environmental sustainability was important. So part of the message was about improving environmental performance of the homes. When we look at that in a little bit more detail, the home group found that only 44% of those had heard of the term net zero. So again, understanding the terminology, the language to use, thinking about how to communicate that forward. 65% were then oblivious to the UK government net zero targets. So again, when we're talking about the language and the way of communicating it, if from those responses actually government targets weren't something that was on the radar for people, then the language and terminology that needed to be used needed to be framed differently. So making it bespoke, making it essentially special for those people that really talk to them about actually what matters to them. So from that 80%, you can see that environmental sustainability is something that was important to them. That language obviously is it kind of accepted. So framing the retrofit discussions around that was something really important. What they also found was thinking about the wider group as well. So not just the project area, thinking about the wider kind of context of this. So thinking about it specifically, but also the kind of wider estates, the wider kind of demographic of people, really, really important here. So when we look at the 90 properties, 78 initially signed up. So that's a nice percentage to start off with a further 10 agreeing halfway through the engagement strategy timeline. So they set up a timeline of engagement and thinking about those sessions that they were having with the contractors, the letters. So people initially signed up, but also there were some people that also came along as well. Importantly, part of this was around that regular monitoring and evaluation of key touch points, making sure that the customers, the residents, the tenants were satisfied throughout that journey. So having that timeline, those key touch points, understanding that that mattered, that satisfaction mattered to those people. Also thinking about, okay, well, after 1 month of completion, how are things going? Really understanding where their points of a conflict, concern, challenge. And what Home Group found with this particular project is that overall, their residents, their tenants were really satisfied with this project, particularly in terms of getting that context and the language for people. So one resident reported that their monthly bills had reduced from £7 a day to 70p a day. Now, that of course will depend on what tariffs they were on and what was installed. However, the language there is about cost savings, and that mattered to that resident, and that was something that they communicated outwards. So thinking about what matters to people, how best to kind of communicate that has been a real lesson learned, particularly for this project. As I've talked about lots, it's about putting people at the heart of things, clear messaging, having the opportunity to face. Lots of people do really appreciate that. Making sure that there is access to experts, so retrofit coordinators, designers, architects, external wall installers, whoever it might be, that opportunity to ask questions is often something that we see as being massively beneficial. Having that communication being regular and open, having support networks in terms of that, we've seen projects where there has been the pilot house maybe on the end of a terrace being done, and having that as an opportunity for people to be based there. So maybe the tenant liaison officer, site manager, a place for people to focus on and be able to go in and really build on that community network and that the communication that goes through. Language, I think, is really important, not just about translation into different languages. So whether that is you have a community who speak a lot of Urdu or Spanish, you might be close to the Welsh borders, so thinking about the language there. It's also thinking about the terminology we use. So is it a retrofit project, or is it a refurbishment or a home improvement project? Thinking about people who actually do have a difficulty with language. So this might be Braille, it might be a written word, it might be a recording, for example, that can be provided to someone who would find that particular element beneficial. So really thinking about the language, not using overly technical language as well, making it relatable into what it means for them. So what it will look like, there will be a unit outside your house. There will be double glazing, which is 2 panes of glass. All of that kind of language, really important. And again, it will depend on your tenants and your residents. Just wanted to include this. So this is a very well-known housing, well, not a housing company, home decoration company. You can see very clearly these are instructions on how to build a bookcase. There's very limited, if not any limited kind of language on here. It's very much stage by stage. It's image driven. Sometimes this is the kind of communication that is going to be really important. So that's showing of what a heating replacement might look like, what external wall insulation, whatever it is that you're doing, pictorially displayed visually to enable more people to understand it. So just an example of how we can possibly do that. It's also thinking about online versus kind of traditional. There are absolutely a wide range of different ways to do this. There can be emails, social media points. So that might be you use LinkedIn, you use Facebook, you use X, which I think it's called now, Instagram, whichever is your kind of portal for doing that. If it's already used within your organization, absolutely tap into that. Utilizing newsletters as well. It might be that you are local authority, so therefore utilize that website. Text messages can be really useful. Online resources as well, links to these masterclasses, so that people can go and join in and listen. A word of, I guess, caution with text messages. Last year we did a project with resident engagement, and the council sent out text messages to invite people to complete an online survey. When we had our in-person resident engagement session in a community centre, lots of the residents said that they didn't answer it because they didn't trust that it was taking you to an external website. And that was a really interesting point that hadn't necessarily been thought about. So again, understanding where that issue of trust sits. Thinking about local methods of contact as well. So lots of people love a letter. It might be newspaper articles are a way forward. Door-to-door discussions. So again, linking in with tenancy teams. It might be linking in with the health and safety team if they're doing fire risk assessments. Flyers can be really useful. Again, comes with a cost, but if you already have a budget, that there is something already going out, can we double that up? And linking in with local community groups as well. Organisations like food banks, which are multiple across the country. It might be a local environmental charity, Men in Sheds, whatever it might be. Think about those local, unique, fabulous opportunities that might present themselves. So again, there are multiple options. If you come to one of these events that I've done before, we had a look at a bus that went round rural locations, which had samples. Again, think about what might work for your organisation and what capabilities do you have in there. So community events, there might be an annual festival that takes place. It might be around particular educational workshops, so linking in with local schools, and particularly primary schools can be really, really helpful. Having those demonstration homes, so that I talked about the end terrace being the kind of the pilot where the project has kind of worked through. Having those drop-in days, community champions, mobile people as well, having those people coming round and having that opportunity to just have that kind of casual and informal discussions with them. So we've to leave enough time so we can have some discussions. Pulling it all together, it's about really understanding who your community is. It's understanding that actually they will have challenges, they will have a historical lived experience of projects before, positively and negatively. So thinking about how that is going to potentially influence the uptake of a particular project. Also thinking about what matters to them. What is the dynamic of that home as well? Is it a single person? Is it a home of multiple occupancy? Is it multi-generational? Always think about, who is it? Who is there and what is going to matter to them? What has worked before or not worked? So again, this might be around other asset management based projects that have been undertaken on that particular block or that series of homes. What did work well? Always find those positives, but also understand that sometimes there will have been those negatives. So it might be around car parking, it might be around scaffold being up longer than it was suggested to be. So understanding those reasons can be really helpful in understanding negativity associated with works. Thinking about the communication tools, what's available to you, what have you worked with before, what's worked well. Do you have a particular inspirational person in a comms team who's really fabulous at this? Absolutely, kind of ask them for help and support. Most importantly, put residents at the centre of it. They should absolutely be part of the process, whether that is about, kind of picking the colour of the render, if that is a possibility for you in your planning setting, or it might be just the ability to just talk to someone about what might be going on. And absolutely start now. Even if you haven't got a particular end point in sight, saying, at some point we would like to be doing some works on your estate, on your terrace, on your block, whatever it might be. Start that dialogue, find those people to talk to. Conflict might happen, but understanding that people are all different, they have different challenges, they have different circumstances, is going to be really valuable in terms of pushing forward a successful retrofit project. As always, with all of our masterclasses, we would recommend having a look at other documents and things that we've kind of had a look at. So there is a link there to the resident engagement homepage on the SHRA site, which has got toolkits, other masterclasses, other kind of case studies that are really going to be useful to you. So please do share with colleagues and go and have a look at there. We've got one example from the Waits Group and Nottinghamshire County Council from a tenant, and fabulous Sheila really kind of talks through in her language how the project has gone through. So again, a really nice example to kind of have a look at and to understand, as well as kind of seeing actually, it does make a benefit. And that is the kind of key thing, is that the projects that we are all doing are making a difference to people's lives. And that's really important, I think, to remember when it can be particularly challenging. So I'd recommend either of those to have a look at. And that brings me to the hopefully the final slide, which, as always, if you have any further queries or questions, please do use the info@socialhousingretrofit.org.uk email address. So this might be a particular query that you have. always kind of looked after by our colleagues, and they will, if they can't answer it straight away, they will always try and come and ask some of the subject matter experts and hopefully give you a suitable response. Always as well, go and have a look at the website. There's a ton of resources on there, toolkits, recorded masterclasses, podcasts as well. So really do go and have a look at those resources. They are there, they are free to use, so share them with colleagues as well. But thank you very much.